This is the Not So Korean podcast with Jay and Tim. I am Jason Verney. As you probably know, and as we always say, we usually record this live in UK's Koreatown itself. That's an area in and around New Malden. Yes, that's the largest Koreatown and Korean community in Europe. But I must add a quick statement from me, Jay, before passing you over to myself, on the fly and on the move, somewhere else. Due to the nature of this episode, some segments, and in particular the sound quality, will differ slightly. Hopefully this won't affect your listening pleasure though. Enjoy! I'm just sitting here with James Turnbull. James Turnbull runs the Grand Narrative, a blog, a website you might have heard of, dealing with Korean feminism, sexuality, that's Korean sexuality, Korean popular culture. And we're both feeling quite full. We've just been for an Indian meal, and bizarrely enough, we went there 10 days ago. It's Bollywood Busan, or is it Busan Bollywood? I always get the two.
I just think Bollywood.
Yeah, Bollywood, because he's in Busan. So for him, yeah. But ironically enough, a few years ago when we met in Busan, we went the same place, so we've now been 3 times. We're going to talk to James about what he does, what he is sort of thing, his time in Korea, and all that kind of stuff. So yeah, welcome again to the Not So Korean podcast, James. It's good for you to take the time.
Thank you for inviting me.
No worries. So first thing I'll just ask is the Grand Narrative, which is where all your work has stemmed from, I'm guessing.
Yeah, centered on, yeah.
Yeah. So that only happened when you moved to Korea. And when did you move to Korea? And so how many years ago, I guess, or a year? And also why ending up in Busan, which is where we are now?
I came to Korea in May 2000 from New Zealand, where I went to university, but I'm actually from England and I've lived in Australia. It was quite complicated. I lived in Jeonju for 3 years. That was where my English teacher recruiter found a job for me. And that's where I met my wife, who is also from Jeonju. And Jeonju is a really nice place, very pleasant, very pretty. But I was young, my then girlfriend was young. We wanted somewhere a bit more exciting. And we're trying to decide between Seoul and Busan. And Busan is Korea's second biggest city. And crucially, it was close to Jeonju. It's an hour and a half in a bus. So she wanted to be closer to her family, so we came to Busan in 2003, and we've been here ever since.
Yeah, I've still yet to go to Jeonju, but yeah, I hope to go. But yeah, that's interesting. So the Grand Narrative. Now, I always wonder if that is the way you say narrative. It is, because I deal with films with a narrative or narrative. I always wonder if that's the right way to say it, but it's the Grand Narrative. So I wondered if you could just tell us a little bit about what the Grand Narrative is. Obviously, it's on social media, it's everywhere, I would say, but what it is, and also why that name.
Perhaps I should start with the name first. I was a history and political studies major. A lot of people assume I was a gender studies major or something like that. I did study that a bit, women's studies back then it was, in the 90s. But no, political studies, history, and back in the mid-90s when I was a student, that was just after the end of the Cold War, and all of the comfortable, convenient, big stories, the grand narratives of communism versus capitalism, etc., modernism, postmodernism, everything was suddenly thrown into disarray, and my lecturers were saying, what is going to be the next grand narrative, what is going to be the story that defines our lives? And, I was a young student, so, and I was young, just not a student, and, 19, 20, 21-year-olds were all trying to figure out life and come across questions and make some kind of sense out of it all, and so that was a grand narrative, just making sense of it all. It just so happened I was in Korea then. It started 2007, but that was the reason for the name.
So you mentioned you started in political the political studies, but how did that then go to the female and what you touch on is feminism. I can't even say that word. Feminism, Korean sexuality for women, essentially,
well,
but not
sexuality in general.
Yeah, in general, and the Korean popular culture. So I just wondered
Sorry, you did ask, and
no, that's okay. I don't know if
originally I wasn't focused on that at all. I just it started in 2007, and I just did it on a whim. Everyone was starting a blog then, and back then I used to think I was smart, so I thought, I should do this too, and I just talked about anything. But within a few years, I realized a lot of people were reading it. Also, 2006, my first daughter was born. 2008, my second daughter was born. And I once went on a 4-week trip to see family in Australia and New Zealand. And my father pointed out just how much time I was spending on this blog. Long story short, I realized I should stop just writing about things on a whim. I was spending all this time, and for what? I should have a purpose with it. Also, and this more pertains to your question, sorry, Jason.
That's okay. That's good.
I read a lot of advice back then about how to blog, etc., why do it, and many blogs on blogging advise find your own niche. And back then, there weren't many blogs at all, of course, but back then there was just virtually nothing in English about those topics, about Korean feminism, about Korean sexuality, even Korean popular culture, because there weren't many blogs back then. And this was before the second wave of Hallyu, the K-pop-led wave. It was, the first wave was dramas. So I decided to focus on those, make them my niche. And don't get me wrong, a lot of people, even back then, were writing excellent stuff about Korean feminism and so on, but I was the only one who decided to write about those consistently. And hence, for a long time, if you typed Korean feminism, for example, into
Google.
Yeah, into Google. You'd get me. You'd get my shining, visage,
younger face,
which actually a lot of people did not like. They certainly didn't expect. They did not like when they Googled Korean feminism.
Because you're a male and you're a non-Korean.
Yeah, there's being a cishet middle-aged white guy is about as privileged as you can get. And there are legitimate issues with people with my background writing about the topics I do.
Essentially, what I want to sort of know is, why did you go into the Korean feminism when you were writing this blog, and it was essentially about various political or Korean aspects, maybe, and then you went down a feminist route, or am I getting that wrong?
Slightly wrong. I wrote about pretty much whatever came to my head. It wasn't by no means career focused whatsoever at the beginning, but after a couple of years, I realized, it was pointed out to me, that I was spending a lot of time on this, and my first daughter had been born already, and then after I started the blog, my second daughter was born, and I had 2 babies to look after, and I didn't have a great job back then, and I was spending all this time on writing. To what end? Back then, I read a lot of blogs about blogging, and they generally gave advice about this sort of thing, and many of them consistently said, find your niche. And I noticed that there was really nothing in English available. I mean, even in legit, university, there wasn't much in university journal articles in English. I tell a lie, there was, but we're talking about 2007, 8, 9, 10 here. It wasn't like it was an easy thing to get hold of an English journal article about Korea on the internet back then, and it's not like the universities were promoting these sorts of things. So, but there wasn't much anyway, and there was certainly no one writing about Korean feminism, Korean sexuality in English in a non-academic style. And also I realized there was a lot, of course, information about these in Korean, but it wasn't getting translated. It wasn't getting out at all. And so I took getting it out as part of my mission. It's not my only one, and this was a long time ago again. But also, because I was spending so much time on it, I realized I had to professionalize it a bit more, because I talked about all manner of crap, and I was much younger then, and I was much more full of myself, and I really honestly, I used to be the worst kind of typical expat male. I came here and immediately I thought I knew everything about the place, and fortunately, and unlike most guys like that, or women who come to live in a new country and or think they know everything, I actually put my opinions out there on the blog, and not everything I wrote was complete crap, but a lot of it was, and people, I realized people were starting to read this because they would leave comments. These days, no one leaves comments. It's all on social media. But back then, I'd get lots of comments and pointing out my mistakes, etc. And not often, the people writing were wrong, but more often than not, they pointed out legitimate mistakes and they had to admit, yes, they were right. And that was another great attraction of a blog. Interacting with people, I've made so many friends, met so many much smarter, more erudite people than myself through the blog, including my host as we speak. So that was another attraction of it. So I mean, that was another good reason to, interacting with smart people isn't a reason to focus on those topics, but there's a snowballing effect.
You learn from others, and what do you mean? And you mean you learn from others, or you pick up?
No. So I mean that once you start focusing on those topics, then I hesitate to describe I'm in a bit of a dilemma because for my own personal career goals, etc. Yes, I do want people to think of myself as an expert in these topics, and of course, sorry about my cat, but I have been writing about these topics for 15 years now, and I've been this. Maybe this should be a separate question or something, because the fact is I am a cishet middle-aged white man writing about essentially 95% Korean woman, and there's a lot of issues which come up with that. It's not just it doesn't mean I shouldn't write about Korean women, or I have no right to write about Korean women, but it does mean I need to be cognizant of my background and take into account my ideological baggage, my privilege, and so on. But these are all issues that have been well studied, and people, or researchers in anthropology, are well aware of. These are not insurmountable. And also, crucially, I do hear people's concerns about me being a white guy writing about Korean women. So to counter that as best as possible, I use Korean sources as much as possible. In fact, although I do still, like I said, I've been doing this for 15 years. I've been invited to lecture overseas about it. So, I do know a few things about these topics by now. And I've read some books, and Jason can see my 1,000 books.
It's pretty impressive.
And some of them don't have pictures.
Some of them just.
That's the thing. So in addition to me getting information about Korea, which is only in Korean out there, also I can take all of these sources and come to my own conclusions. And I might be wrong about some things, but why not? Why can't I do that? And
Yeah.
often, if you do actually read my blog, two important things about it. Half of the time, people accuse me of being this know-it-all white guy, and what shouldn't I know my place? Why on earth am I writing about Korean women? And again, in some cases, maybe in 1 out of 10 cases, no, not even that, they're just trolling. But in some cases, they've got legitimate points. But I'm doing my best to counter them. And my point here is that if you look at what I've written about or what I write about, usually I'm literally the only person on the entire planet writing about these things. If it wasn't for me, this information about Korea, or at least this perspective, which is based on 15 years of research and using Korean sources, which just would not be out there at all. And, excuse me, Paul.
So we just got interrupted by something the cat was doing. So we'll let James finish what he was saying.
So 2 things which define my blog, I guess. The first one I said, I use Korean sources as much as possible. I hear people's legitimate concerns about someone with my background writing about this topic. I hear your concerns, and I try to take them into account as much as possible. And this is something that really annoys me. It used to upset me more, but it's just the internet. And that is, people accuse me of being arrogant and speaking over the voices of Korean women, etc. And it is true that, especially in the past, international media, they would, in seeking someone to speak about Korea or write about Korea, that until a few years ago, most even of the people writing about Korea were white men who were just parachuted into interviewing BTS or someone, or Girls' Generation, and they knew nothing about K-pop, and they were the worst choice possible to make that interview, and they said some appalling things, and I'm just assumed to be exactly like them. My point being, if you actually read my blog, I'm constantly talking about all of these issues. I mentioned, that I have problems finding sources. I just don't know some things. I'm aware of my cultural and ideological baggage. I am not. Like I said, I get annoyed being lumped in with all of these people who know nothing about Korea and are just parachuted into writing about a topic they know nothing about. People who actually read me would know the exact opposite. Something important about about the media and Korea, which came up in my mind while I was saying that. I said this was a case a few years ago, but actually now, the notion that only white men are writing about ignorant white men are writing about Korea these days is completely not true. If you actually look at the names of the vast majority of the authors of articles about Korea these days, they're mostly Korean American or Korean woman. The notion of, certainly you still get some ignorant white men parachuted to talk about topics they know nothing about. That's definitely still occurs, but the bulk of foreign media coverage about Korea these days is by extremely knowledgeable, much smarter than me, Korean woman or Korean American woman. So
so they have the knowledge and the ability maybe to actually speak about that kind of thing, and they might, ironically, they might even refer to, if they wanted to, they could refer to some of your work.
Some have.
Some have. Oh yeah. I will say one thing. I can relate to what you're saying in the fact that I'm a writer and I'm a filmmaker and a podcaster and all these things and a poet and stuff. But I do worry as well that I'm saying stuff about Korea and I'm picking certain things and someone might say, how can you say that? But at least I have been here. I have lived here. I've got friends. I haven't lived here, sorry. I've integrated myself in the community and observed stuff. But of course, I'm not the expert, but I'm just saying how I can relate to that in some ways. But I just want to ask 2 things about that, just to clarify again. So you mentioned because you had your daughters, that swayed. That's the first. This is the first question. That kind of swayed you going down the feminism route. Did that have an influence or not?
Not really. I mean, certainly no. It was more just my lefty background. My father studied psychology at university, and he had so many social studies related books, and a lot of my majors were history and political studies. I had a very eclectic range of subjects I studied because I kept failing, because I kept refusing to actually hand in work if it wasn't perfect.
It does help.
Yeah, so I even did some women's studies, papers they were called, in New Zealand, and courses.
Okay.
So it's more my background, but of course, having daughters helps, and this should not be the case, but it's very much true that having daughters does tend to make men. It's an established fact. It makes men more feminist because than men who only have sons. You shouldn't have to have a daughter to treat women equally or see their concerns, but nonetheless, having daughters forces many men to look at things from their perspective and changes them.
Yeah, I've got 4 sisters and a very female family, and I wonder if that plays a part in what I talk about and stuff. But the other thing I want to talk is just quickly ask about, touching on what you mentioned, is the fact that you did translate some articles. So by then, whatever that year was, you had already, that helped that you had, if you were just a British person or whatever, British and a non-Korean here, but you hadn't learnt, you were just speaking in your own language and hadn't learned any of the Korean, then you wouldn't have been able to translate some of those articles that you were talking about, or papers, was it?
You mentioned earlier. I'm not seeing your point, sorry.
Did having the knowledge of Korean language, by the sounds of things, help in that back then, because you could actually decipher certain things?
These days I've already talked about it with you, Jason, but for your audience, these days I translate as part of my job at Dongseo University. In the last few years, I think maybe 5 years now, Google Translate has dramatically improved to the extent that even professional translators, because I'm not a professional translator, we just stick the document into Google Translate, and that covers 90% of it, and the remaining 10% is finding the mistakes, because there still will be some, and putting it into, in my case, more natural English, translate from Korean to English. But back then, the translation programs were terrible. So although it's not like I expect a cookie or a gold star for this, but the translated articles until before 2016 or so, when Google Translate became that much better, they represent one single blog post could have meant 10 hours of translation, and that's just translating, let alone doing all the writing and trying to etc. Nowadays I used to have a dilemma, which I've finally resolved, and that is, okay, if I come across some Korean news, which I think more people should know about, but these days, anyone that wants to know about it, they can just, I have it on my computer, and my Firefox, I've got an add-on, I just click on it and it shows it in English. You can get these from any browser, Google Chrome, or etc. But... So why should I even bother translating this? Because, this brings up one other thing. One is that in the past, especially when I started translating stuff about K-pop, again, I might be the only person translating it at all. But once K-pop really took off, then I just stopped translating stuff about K-pop. People would translate it instantly. But anything non-K-pop related, Korean sexuality related or something like that, then, anyone, because there's so much more interest in Korea now, and anyone could find it and just quickly press that add-on button and see what it meant. They don't need me to translate it. So and also I was busy. Life is tough. Yeah. So I was in a dilemma, should I translate it or not? Usually I wouldn't, but I'm finding now that just because there's some Korean news out there, it doesn't mean that people are looking at it it doesn't, there's no, certainly people might privately be translating it with their button on their browser, but it doesn't mean if they are, they're not talking about it in English. So this is another side effect of working on these topics for 15 years and posting them to social media. In fact, the social media is actually sort of overwhelmed the blog, and that is I know where to get all of this information. I have, as I explained in my blog a year ago, I used to spend an hour a day just finding stuff, collecting it and posting it on Twitter and Facebook and LinkedIn and so on. And at least an hour a day I was doing that. And instead of writing, which I realized I had to stop, and I told everyone, that's the case. I know where all of these sources are, I know, etc. If you, for example, wanted to take over my job, please do. After 15 years of this, but if you wanted to start from scratch, getting all of these sources, which I have, and getting all of these RSS feeds, etc., it would probably take you 2 or 3 hours a day. Albert, shush. Maybe that's one. I'm just mentioning it. Not. And again, people shouldn't be giving me a cookie or something for that. I do this because I'm interested in it. Although donations, every once a year, might be nice. Just to kind of account for the fact that I come across these important, interesting things about these topics, which I don't translate because I
getting interrupted by the cat again.
Because I think people who are interested will have already read it, but maybe they're unaware of its existence. So there's definitely still a role for what I do.
Yeah, definitely. And one thing I will say, a couple of things I want to touch on is you have an Instagram account. You post a lot about different books that you've obtained, and do you read all these? Now, obviously, I imagine you do over time, but you post a lot. So, how do you keep up with? Do you these books are really interesting books, and I haven't read them. He's like headbutting me now.
Yeah,
that's the cat, by the way, not James. Not James. James is not headbutting me. Basically, I was actually just asking whether the books you read, it seems to be loads that you post on whichever social media platform, but there seems to be so really interesting ones. Of course, they interest you. They obviously help they are your research, aren't they? If anything, but you get through them. I mean, how long? How they seem to pop up so often that surely you can't get through those books. They're just on your shelf, ready to be read, or they're half read, or you haven't. Is there many books you still haven't read relating to this?
Well, I post when I get a book because I'm happy to receive it, and there may be several months before I actually read it. But I have a book club on associated with my blog now. It's just been going for a year now, nearly, and we just look at Korean literature, and that's been great because although it's a very small book club, I've met people. Again, much smarter and much more knowledgeable about Korean books than myself, and it forces the fact that specifically with the fiction books, the fact that I have to come up with smart sounding questions to lead the discussion, the meetings, which we have 2 a month now,
That's good.
And the fact that that makes me much more think about those specific books much and I'm embarrassed by my lack of knowledge about Korean literature compared to the other attendees of the meetings. So I'm learning a lot from them, but It's mostly non-fiction, and it's by no means.
Non-fiction.
Yeah, no, it's mostly non-fiction books,
Okay.
and most of them aren't about Korea. In fact, Jason can see I love books. I love reading.
I can't see what they are.
But so I read them.
Okay.
I can show you the book I just read. It's full of post-its. Hello,
Okay.
Albert.
No, I believe you.
Right. But the thing
just...
about books is that I have very little experience of reviewing books.
Yeah.
So that's why I've barely given any reviews on my blog of books.
Yeah.
But I'm changing because I have very little experience of doing proper book reviews, and I mean to start those eventually. But in the meantime, this is something that came up recently. Yeah, there's a lot of Tumblrs I follow where the person just says, "I'm reading this book. Here's a paragraph. The end." And I can't. Originally, I couldn't imagine myself doing that because I thought it's just a way of saying, "Look, I'm reading this book. Look how smart I am." I haven't actually said anything original about it. I haven't commented. It's just. So I couldn't see myself doing that, and I actually still can't see myself doing that. But I'm reading these books and I'm learning so much from them. And the book I just finished, it's. Can I just grab it? I'll be 10 seconds.
Yeah, of course. And while James is doing that, it was quite funny just now because James was sitting there stroking one of his cats. I think it's Albert. And he was just like... James reminded me of a James Bond villain there stroking his cat.
I have a shaved head, yes.
Yeah, that as well. But it wasn't necessary for that, but maybe. So this book is full of notes. I can see it here. It's called Working Out in Japan, Shaping the Female Body in Tokyo Fitness Clubs by Laura Spielvogel.
Yes, I guess.
And there's loads of markers. Yeah, there's loads of 2003. Yeah, and there's loads of markers in the pages. Post-its. They're tiny ones. But they look like long post-its. Are they? Yeah, they're post-its but cut up. I see. There's loads of things. He's got references. I guess he's. But so you'll talk about that in the book clubs.
No.
That's separate.
We only do clean literature in that. Okay, there's a lot of amazing things in this book, but there's so many. How can I condense all of these? And these are just post-its. I took photos in the subway when I didn't have post-its on me. So I could, each one of these, if I just typed out this paragraph to people on the blog and they go, wow, and but there's too many.
Yeah.
So and like I said, I don't know how to do book reviews, and book reviews, they don't just copy and paste paragraphs generally. Well, for good reason, but it also means unless you read the book, then you're missing out. So I have started, this is a very recent thing. So there's lots of great things in this book, hence all the post-its, and I want to say them, but there's too many. And I have very little experience writing book reviews, so what happens? I generally don't write anything about all of these amazing books I'm reading and all of these amazing things I'm learning. And that makes me come across as much more cynical and critical of Korea and Korean feminism, sexuality, popular culture, etc. than I am. I love studying these topics. I love learning about them. And, like I said earlier in this interview, I was sort of the most insufferable, typical white male expat who comes to Korea and after 2 years thinks he knows everything about the place. Now at 46... And I'm 46 years old now, but much earlier I realized I knew barely anything, and I still have so much to learn. But it's amazing learning, and I learned so much from this book, and I want to share that enthusiasm with people. So that I am going to start. I'll never just copy and paste a paragraph. No. That's it. But I will say, check this out. I liked it because of this reason. This links to this, and this, and this, which I've written about already, and that's another reason why it's so
So this book, which is working out in Japan, how will that? Now, obviously, it's to the female body in fitness clubs, or that's what it's subtitled. That's what it says. But how does that come into? We don't want to go into this book in this podcast, but you'll find similarities with Korean culture and women.
Extremely, yeah. For example, I've written about in Korea, if you're a woman, having thick calves, the muscles on your legs is very much a no-no, and so it's some women have operations to physically cut the muscle and fat out of their legs, and there's ads. And there's ads which shame girls for one. It was a few years ago. I don't remember the specific product being sold, but in the ad, and ads are a much bigger deal in Korea than, that's a whole other topic, is the athletic looking female high school student was walking up a hill every day to get to school, and then she looks back at the legs and, oh my God, my calves are so big. And this book, it goes into
Japanese.
Yeah, it's about Japan.
Yeah,
and by all means, Japan is not Korea, but there's Japan and because of the colonial history, etc. There's a whole other topic. Japan and Korea are much closer, much more similar than England and France and even America and Canada. And in this particular case, they share that beauty ideal for women with thin calves, and she goes into that. For example, I haven't attended a gym in Korea in 20 years, but
he does jog because he told me earlier.
But I noticed a certain gym culture in Korea then, and this was written in 2003, and she writes about how it was the same in Japan, and she writes about she and Laura Spielvogel. She's a very academic because she was actually a qualified aerobics instructor.
Right.
So she worked. This is mostly about. There's a heavy aerobics component to this book, and she worked in these companies as an aerobics instructor. So she was in the back rooms. She was always treated as a foreigner, but she was actually an employee and also treated as an employee. And she showed how gender relations and unequal gender relations, which you find in, we associate with sort of, jaebol in Korea or salary men kind of positions, etc., how they're actually replicated and reproduced and socialized into the employees within even a Japanese health center or health club, fitness club, which you would think would be very far removed from the large corporations which we typically associate with gender inequality in Japan and Korea, perhaps. She demonstrated how this was gender inequality was maintained within her workplaces. And I've seen myself how even it's slightly innocuous things actually maintain gender inequality within Korean universities, which I've read about. This is everything links, and I'm learning so much, and I just want to share that. So that's something I'll be doing a lot more of.
Yeah, no, that's really interesting. And also I was just thinking, even if there's something in the book that doesn't have a parallel or similarity with Korea, it still makes you think. If it says something, you think, I wonder how that is in Korea. And then you might go off and research, think about that. I don't know, because that's how I read stuff sometimes.
Certainly, I'd be a very boring person if the only thing I ever read about Korea, was about Korea or Japan.
Exactly. You've got to make. That's it. The world has an effect on other countries as well.
And of course, writing in English about sexuality and feminism, etc., I try to keep up to date with these issues in other countries. Of course, not Korea, but Most of the books in that bookcase. Well, actually, the Korea section is in that bookcase,
Right.
and the Feminism and Sexuality and Pop Culture, not Korea, is in that bookcase.
Yeah. I would actually thought there'd be more books. I mean, I can see a hell of a lot, but because I know you
in
posted
that
them.
room, and
Yeah, of course, there's one there. Yeah, so now
Sorry.
let's lead. No, that's okay. So now let's lead on to. You mentioned we mentioned your blog. That was the whole spark of this interview, really. Now you've mentioned the book club. Now that's not to do with this book,
No.
but the book club you do. If people want to find out about that, which people attend those book club thingies? And do they find out from your website? Does it?
Yeah,
'Cause
yeah.
I looked
so
on there.
every month. Well, it used to be one book a month, but we made it two. Well, I made it 2 books a month because I'd have a problem with 1 book a month. I'd read it but the meeting wasn't actually till the last Thursday of a month, and so I'd forget about it for 3 weeks, and it was. But also.
Yeah.
Anyway, so yeah, I tell people well in advance what the next book is, and to give them a chance to order it and get it delivered and read it, and then I post the questions.
Where does this take
On
part?
my blog, and we do it on Zoom.
Zoom, that's what I
Zoom,
wanted to get.
And the first meetings, well, I said from the beginning, I think 12 would be the maximum.
Okay.
But in the first meeting we had 7, but after that, generally 1 or 2. Not 1 or 2, not including myself.
Yeah.
But people who are in other book clubs, they assure me that that's quite normal. I don't feel bad that there's not 12 people. The more the merrier. So if people want to join, to avoid trolls, which of whom I have many, and who would be quite happy to set up some sock account to try to get on, then you shoot me an email, and then if I in the rare case, you email me, I put all the details, and if I don't know you, if you don't have an obvious social media presence, and if you could just prove that you're you, then you'd be more than welcome, and I would give you the Zoom meeting details and everything.
Okay, and also touching on that on the blog, the website. One thing I noticed on it was the we're going to talk about briefly, and I know we've been going a while, but maybe this will be a 2-parter.
Sure.
This particular
interview,
or even this interview or this episode. But I noticed on there, well, first of all, there's quite a lightheartedness in what you don't do and don't accept. For example, students wanting to have their work checked and read and stuff like that, because their teachers should be doing that. So I thought that was quite amusing and truthful.
I used to say, your teacher, I understand. Well, they're just being. I'm not unfriendly. I've helped people too much, and I point out, they're actually your tutors. Actually paid. They're not paid enough, but they do get money. Yeah. I have had some ridiculous requests.
Oh, right.
Please edit my thesis.
Yeah. And probably for nothing. Yeah. Bless them, bless the students and that. But the other thing, of course, which this links into, which is mentioned on the blog website, Grand Narrative, is that you do lectures, and so. You sometimes do lectures and talks, or you have done in the past, and I just wondered the topics that you're generally asked to do, or are you invited sometimes, and then they say you pick the topic, or how does it generally work with those kind of things?
I used to be invited a great deal to give guest lectures, usually at other universities in Korea. Once in Wellesley, the first one ever was Wellesley College in Boston, and that kind of gave me inflated expectations of my life as a blogger, because the very first place I was invited to, they flew me to Boston and put me up in the Sheraton.
This is me now.
Yeah, this is my new life.
Yeah,
I'll get back to that life. Don't I? Rest assured. Yeah. So people would find me on the blog, and they would invite me. They generally wouldn't have any demands at all about what I blogged about. And yeah, at one point I think I gave 1 year. I think I gave 6 or 7 guest lectures.
Okay.
But unfortunately, because Korean universities are running out of money, including my own, and running out of money because they're running out of students because of the Korea's birth rate issue, which if you have blogged about a lot, then unfortunately all the money available for just giving me money to go there, let alone a speaker's fee, which I almost never got. I just did it for because I love doing it. They've pretty much dried up.
Well, hopefully they'll pick
but
up again on different angles.
I taught summer school at Hanguk Wede in Seoul for 4 weeks, 6 weeks, which I really loved, and I learned a lot from doing it myself from my students. I miss that because I really miss the giving guest lectures. And if you want me to come to your university, your company, etc., I've done it for a radio station once, actually.
Oh wow, that's something.
Then just get in touch. I'm very cheap. All I need, please, is
some money.
I need some money to get there.
Take my transportation. Maybe some coffee, some food.
Yeah, coffee's always good.
Maybe accommodation. But I was going to say, we'll round this interview off because we could talk hours about this, and we could talk about, the femininity, the sex trade in Korea. We could talk about K-pop, as we've touched on earlier, but we haven't really touched on it. And actually, talking about lecture, and you just said a radio show. You did a radio show.
Not a radio show, no. Sorry, I maybe gave the wrong impression. It's been about 3 or 4 years now since I was on BFM, the Busan radio station, but English radio station. But I have been on there something like 18 times, maybe. Wow. I lost track, but like I said. Not for 4 years. Maybe I offended someone. Yeah,
I'm sure you did.
I know. I'm just joking.
But you won't.
But it wasn't. BFM used to have a sort of group of smart people who liked hanging out and giving lectures in a sort of restaurant to each other, etc. And so once I gave one, unfortunately that kind of dried up as well.
Well, right. Well, the reason I was saying that was because you mentioned that, and because you could do a lecture, and as we can see and hear, rather, you talk at length about all kinds of things. So we could easily put a microphone in front of you and just let you lecture to our audiences. That's just
yes, sir. I'd love to.
half joking.
I'd love to. I've done a few Zoom things on Zoom.
Even audio. You could just sit there with this and go. Read your paper. But it's just as
probably
these
Zoom
days
would be better because I gave a lecture. Last year on Zoom, but for various reasons I couldn't actually see anyone.
Technical reasons.
Yeah, technical reasons. So that
was weird.
Yeah, it was weird, and
it
wasn't. I didn't present myself in the best fashion.
Yeah, because you're worried about who's there, who's out there. You don't even know if it's actually genuine. I don't know. You don't.
I knew they were there. We had audio, but I literally could not see anything. I was just speaking to my PowerPoint.
Well, some people say picture your audience naked, but not literally blanked from the screen.
You need something, right?
Yeah. So there's two things I just want to end this on, really, and that's because I really wanted to ask you about this, and I've only thought about this earlier today. So femininity, sexuality, Korean sexuality, Korean pop culture, and one thing that kind of came to mind was transgender identity. Now, I wondered if you've touched on that or you don't intend to. It's just literally feminine.
But the reason is, maybe you'll cut this out. But the reason is, Korean sexuality is such a broad topic. So again,
should cover it.
You have to find niches within niches.
Yeah.
So this could be part of the interview as well. For example, sex work. There's a researcher called Matthias Lehmann from Germany, and I forgot the name of his blog. Sorry, Korean Sex Work Project or something.
Okay.
If you type in Korea sex work, you'll come across him and his blog, and it's a bit. He's no longer working on it, but he's very much the expert on Korean sex work. So I I just avoided that completely because, and similarly with Korean LGBTQ issues and transgenderism and so on.
And there's people doing that already as well.
Yeah, there are. And Todd Henry, I think he's an academic at Hawaii or California, but he until this when I gave my lecture, I did summer school on gender studies in Korean gender. It was I gave a lecture on LGBTQ in Korea, but this was 2017, and there weren't many sources about those in English in Korea. But I think 2 years ago now, he wrote a book about that, and it's quite good. And so I defer to the experts. That's the thing. If I know nothing about a topic, and there's so much more smarter people than I, then I'll
And even if there aren't more smarter people than you, there are smart people that know things that you don't yet know. So
exactly.
But myself and James have actually last time we met about 10 days ago here in Busan, South Korea. We did talk briefly about the Korean sex trade and also K-pop, but it's for another episode really. But there's different aspects to that. It comes from war, but also it's kind of independence and all kinds of things, the male society. But the last thing we've come down to now, I think, apart from the ending where we'll just give you the board, he's falling asleep. Niche, you mentioned niches a few times, and one I was interested in particular is because it's a person I've interviewed is Kangyu Garam, or Garam Kangyu, and she's a filmmaker. She makes documentaries. She was part of a few directors who made a film called After Me Too, and it hasn't been played that many places. It's been shown only in Korean, I think, most places. And I spoke to the director recently, but you were one of the people that did see it, and you did say something to me about it opening up another niche for you. And I just wondered if you would just be able to just elaborate on that, if you want to just if it's possible.
Certainly. The movie documentary was called After Me Too, and originally I wasn't going to see it because obviously I'm interested in Me Too, but Me Too compared to other aspects of feminism, it's very much a contemporary topic, and so it's there's a voluminous literature on it already, and this is again for me it's again been one of these topics where I've realized that it's not in my best interest to pursue it because I'm very privileged as a cishet white man. I have very few of those issues at my university, although I say that possibly and partially because I have a privilege, I don't see these things, but I should not talk about my specific job, so I won't. And what was I going to say? I tend to steer away from... Sorry, I'm giving too long an answer here.
No, that's fine, because I'm actually personally interested in this as well, because the Me Too movement, but also the film director herself. Of course I'm interested in Korean feminism, but a lot of people associate that with activism and so on, and by all means, and I am interested in that. But again, this is something where I really know my limitations. Anything to do with domestic politics or protests and so on. I just generally avoid that sort of thing because, for example, I know I follow on Instagram, I follow the activities of various Busan feminist organizations, and they have meetings, etc. And imagine if I turned up. What the heck? Even speaking Korean, I'm sure it'd be friendly, but it would also be extremely awkward. Yes.
And
I don't.
I do mean to eventually be less of a armchair feminist and armchair notebook feminist, and be more active myself. But again, I'm a guy. I'm a white guy. I'm a middle-aged white guy in Korea. I'm not saying I should know my place, but I can read the room, and I know where I can be effective and not.
Yeah.
But sorry, because you
mentioned there was a niece.
So I went to see the documentary After Me Too.
Yeah.
And I expected it to be very dry.
Yes.
And very focused on politics, which is not my Korean domestic politics, which is not my forte.
Yeah.
But to my surprise, the documentary was much more artistic and moving than I thought it would be, and it had Korean subtitles, which not English subtitles, had Korean subtitles, and I'm embarrassed to say that often I can understand things as well as I'd like, which is putting myself as well as I'd like, without subtitles. If Korean of course I can understand it with English subtitles, but with Korean subtitles I can get the gist. So I went to see the movie even though I expected it to be dry, and possibly not understand much of it, just to show my moral and financial support. But when I got there, in addition to, like I said, it was much more moving and artistic than I expected it to be. Certainly not dry. There were Korean subtitles. I've got to say, and I hope you tell all of your Korean filmmaker friends, I'm so tired of Korean websites, film websites, cinema websites, etc. They often don't say if it's subtitles or not. Like there was no information about if this had Korean subtitles. I was pleasantly surprised. So I've got an axe to grind about this. I went to the Jeju Women's Film Festival 3 years ago, a few years ago, and in all they don't have much money. It seemed to be a bit of fly by night, which is no criticism of them, but just finding out if certain movies had subtitles or not, because my friend, he couldn't read. His Korean was not good enough to understand just Korean or Korean subtitles. He needed English. Just finding out if a movie had subtitles or not, and then being able to book a ticket to go, and there's no information about subtitles, and it seems this was the Jeju International Women's Film Festival, but there was still no information about subtitles. This is a common complaint I have about film festivals and so on in Korea. But Busan International Film Festival, that's got lots of money, of course, about subtitles. But anyway, sorry. So I was moved, and I finally, I think I found my next niche, additional niche, because I like analyzing Korean popular culture, but I can't say there's really anything which really I'm really enthused about. I really don't like Korean dramas. I'm not saying they're bad, although many are bad, but they just don't do it for me. I haven't really liked Korean movies in general. In fact, the more popular something is, it usually means the less I'm likely to like it. And I was into K-pop for a while, but the thing about indeed, I covered a book chapter about K-pop, but Stephen Epstein and I, we analysed 100 girl group songs to write that chapter. So for about 6 months or a year, I could sort of consider myself a bit of an expert in K-pop. But K-pop is very fast moving, and most of it I didn't like. I only got through those 100 songs because I was listening to dance remixes and not the originals. If you believe, certainly if you claim to be an expert on it, whether you believe it or not, or if you have imposter syndrome or not, or whatever, you have to follow a lot of it. And there is a professor at Busan National University, Sidabo Seiji. She's known as a K-pop professor. She's very well known on Twitter and Facebook for her encyclopedic knowledge of not just K-pop, but Korean popular culture. And she has pointed out, and quite rightfully so, that being an expert on Korean popular culture is a lot of work. And you have to familiarize yourself with all the new dramas coming out, all the new movies, all new K-pop songs, and many of them you may not like at all. But you have to know what people are talking about. And but she loves her topic. And so she has enough of a love in her subject to sustain herself through. I'm very much putting words in her mouth, sorry, so forgive me if I've made a mistake in a sense, but that's why she's so knowledgeable about her subject.
No, it's a niche.
Korean popular culture, she actually knows so much about it, and I'm jealous of the fact that she. I'm jealous of her love for K-pop, for Korean popular culture. So I don't have that love, and so I can't.
You don't have to have that love.
Well, I think you do, because if you
can't like everything.
Yeah, you can't like everything, but you like enough things. So if you're a film critic, for example, you'll come across many films you hate, but there'll be enough of them you like and some you even love to sustain you through the ones you don't like. Unfortunately, I don't like enough K-pop. I don't like enough Korean films.
But that's the same with, sorry to go off the topic a bit, but that's like, I like things that are artistic and creative. So I like creative and artistic, well-done films, and I like creative music. And that brings me to Korean indie. That's where it is. Korean K-pop doesn't fall into that category, whichever way you cut it. I'm not going into K-pop now. That's from another episode. But I'm just saying that you can't necessarily like everything. I don't like everything about Korea. And that's another thing. When I think about people who, what you were saying earlier about you're not Korean and people might criticize you, but I also feel like, yes, but I do love Korea. It's not like you're not like someone who hates Korea and you're.
But although it's a bit of a segue, but although it's not like I can complain about that, but because of what I write about, because I tend to do really long articles criticizing some aspect of Korea, then I can certainly come across as very cynical, and that's why it's so important that I put the love in. I show the love. Not that there's anything wrong with criticizing Korea, but I do genuinely come across as very critical, and I've struggled for a long time because I like analyzing. I love analysis. I love looking at some K-pop song and spending weeks on it,
even though they haven't written it and someone in Sweden might have done.
It's not really. But that will just be one song, and just analyzing to death or over-analyzing one particular music video or song does not make you an expert on K-pop. I do think I'm good at analyzing things, but a huge issue has been my lack of knowledge of the wider. I can't relate it to this song or that song because I don't know it. But it's been an issue. With me, I need to find something I love, and I have already tried to. Well, I love short films, especially especially indie films by Korean women filmmakers.
Me too.
And I'm going to be I'm going to be watching much more. There is this Korean app, which I've talked about before, called Play. It's not just an app; it's a streaming service. And it's exclusively short films by Korean women filmmakers. I had issues with it. It's quite an amusing story. I used it for about a few months, but then stopped because you've got to keep topping up the money, and I was busy. Then I after this movie I started again, but I couldn't register again, and no one could figure it out. And it turned out, and thank you to my wife for her many calls to the company trying to sort us out. It turned out that the ID I was making, which was naturally the grand narrative, that was too long. They hadn't had any.
But it should tell you that.
It should say, but
is it Korean website?
Yes, it's a completely Korean.
They're very clunky. They're very primitive in some ways.
I have to admit, when I checked out, one reason I wasn't as into it 2 or 3 years ago was when it came out was most of their films did not have subtitles, Korean subtitles. That may have changed, but also they're short and my Korean's better, so it won't be a problem.
Okay.
So I'll be checking those and I'll be talking a lot about those in the future. And I may be mistaken, maybe this is not finally some aspect of Korean popular culture that I love, but I hope it will be. And if not, it's another aspect of Korea. It gives me further insight into Korea. I really want to thank my book club members, especially Chelsea and Jake, because both of them know so much more about Korean books than I do. Indeed, I think Chelsea is doing a master's in Korean literature, and Jake, he reads the Korean versions of the books in addition to the English translations. I've just in a few book club meetings, I've learned so much about Korea from them. But I mean, specifically, I can't. English words difficult. Can't think. In a bookish sense.
Bookish.
Yes.
Okay,
so very, but these are
book club kind of way.
Yeah.
They're very. It's a very unique crowd.
Yeah.
And
but I mean. It's just insights in the Korean society from books are one more perspective which has opened up to me, especially because of them from the book clubs.
Do you know, leading off from that, we're going to end this, but do you know Anson J?
Yes.
Brother Anthony?
Yes,
I interviewed
Facebook friends.
Yeah, okay, yeah. We
haven't met, unfortunately, like most of my Facebook friends.
Well, he knows his literature. He's got books. You've got books here, but he's got books that date back.
The second to last book club.
Was he in that?
He translated it. Broken Summer.
Oh right, yes. Broken Summer. Yes, I think he even gave me that book. I think it's the one by who's the.
I've forgotten. So it's.
I interviewed him while I was in Seoul, and he's one of our guests. But yeah, he's someone again who translates, who also knows his books. Has got his books. Korean history books. There's probably only that copy remain. But just because of that the insight that must be in that book. Whatever subject it's on, but it's Korean something or other. It's just something you could learn from that, or anyone could learn from that. I just feel, and you just nodded to the fact that you know about that. You said subtitles because my short film, which is not Korean. I'm not a Korean director. I'm not a woman, but hopefully you can see it because it's got Korean languages Korean language and English language, and it's Korean subtitles coming. And English subtitles on everything. But I was going to say, myself and Tim, we were looking at doing short interviews for this second series, but I want to do long ones where it's really informative, like this interview. So I appreciate your time. And where can people find the Grand Narrative? The website link is thegrandnarrative.com.
Yeah,
because your email address is at something else, isn't it? It's at another domain.
Yeah,
they'll find out the website.
I have my contact details.
It's on the...
and I have a Facebook page for my blog, which is also the Grand Narrative, Facebook, blah, 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 the Grand Narrative of Korea, I think.
And Instagram.
I'm maybe making that into a group instead of a page for various reasons.
That's a good idea. Yeah. Or both. We've got both.
It's a whole other Facebook algorithm issue, which is not very interesting.
We've had things like we've got Not So Korean podcast page and group, and yes, it does cause some probably algorithm and search issues.
And I'm on Twitter. Unfortunately, under at James Turnbull instead of the Grand Narrative. And LinkedIn, although LinkedIn is not my favourite.
No. You said Tumblr as well. I don't know.
I follow a lot of. I follow Tumblr, but I'm not on Tumblr myself. And Instagram, I think I'm a Grand Narrative there as well. Yeah. But Instagram is private because I've taken a few shots from my of the Busan night landscape. Is that the right word? Night view, cityscape.
Yeah.
But I do have some trolls with major psychological issues.
Yeah. They'll see one thing and they'll be like, you were saying this, but you've gone and taken
No,
this.
it's not so much. I mean, I've had threats to me.
Right,
And although I was in practice, if anyone really did want to physically harm me, it's very. It's not like I keep my university a secret. It'd be very easy to find me. But
Well, let's hope.
at least, at least they don't know where I live, and I have children, and I've been very fortunate with my trolls because they started harassing me gradually, and it's never pleasant, but it wasn't like overnight I became an internet pariah or anything like that. It's a very gradual thing, and so I'm used to it now, and I know how to deal with it. But I don't want my children to be exposed to that.
No, that's right. It's not something. Yeah.
And
it's just trolls being trolls.
Yeah.
It's not. It's not. They can start researching this stuff themselves or doing something. Knowledgeable. Like you're doing. Doing something useful with the. I mean, I'm not saying they're not the trolls. I don't know these things.
I know. Yeah, 99 out of 100 trolls, but it's got nothing to do with you. It's just
it's internal anger and other issues. Yeah, okay.
So is that Instagram, Twitter.
Look down. Kat's just joined us for the final.
Facebook and the blog and
We'll put links when we do get this episode out. We'll put links underneath in the description. Great. I hope this might be the last time I see you before I go off back to after Jeju. But I'm going to come to Korea more, as I've said to other people, and So really appreciate that. Really appreciate your time, and myself, James, and is it Albert the cat?
Albert
this
and
one.
Elliot's looking
Elliot,
from a distance.
we say goodbye and we'll sign off. So back to the studio then, I guess. See ya. Well, we hope you enjoyed that episode. So that's all from us. 안녕히 계세요.